What happens when a beloved music legend sits down for what should be a simple chat about his career, only to face accusations, interruptions, and disrespect from a host who refuses to let him speak? In just 40 seconds, one comment would turn a friendly interview into the most explosive confrontation ever seen on daytime television. Cliff Richard walked onto the set that morning, expecting a warm welcome. He had been in the music industry for decades, a household name, someone who had brought joy to millions. The studio lights were bright, the audience applauded politely, and Lorraine Kelly sat behind her desk with that familiar smile plastered across her face. But something felt different today. Something felt off. Cliff took his seat, adjusting his jacket, ready to talk about his new album and his upcoming tour. The other panel members, Christine and David, sat to the side, their faces already showing hints of discomfort. They had worked with Lorraine long enough to know when. She was in one of her moods. Lorraine didn't waste time with pleasantries. She leaned forward, her smile fading almost immediately. "So, Cliff," she began, her tone already carrying an edge, "you're here to promote another album. Tell me, do you ever get tired of recycling the same old songs?" The audience went quiet. Cliff blinked, clearly taken aback. "I'm sorry, what do you mean by that?" "Well," Lorraine continued, waving her hand dismissively, "you've been doing this for what, 60 years? Surely you must run out of things to say at some point. Surely the well runs dry." Christine shifted uncomfortably in her chair. David looked down at his notes, avoiding eye contact with anyone. Cliff maintained his composure, his voice steady. "I think what I do is bring happiness to people. Music has always been about connection, about touching people's hearts. That never gets old." "Touching people's hearts," Lorraine repeated, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "That's a lovely soundbite. Very rehearsed. Did your publicist write that for you this morning?" The atmosphere in the studio had changed completely. What should have been a celebration of an iconic career had turned into something else entirely. Something hostile. "I don't appreciate your tone," Cliff said calmly. "I came here to have a conversation, not to be insulted." Lorraine laughed, a sharp, cutting sound. "Oh, you don't appreciate my tone? Well, I don't appreciate artists who think they're too important to answer honest questions. This is my show, and I'll ask what I want." Christine finally spoke up, her voice hesitant. "Lorraine, maybe we should..." "Maybe we should what, Christine?" Lorraine snapped, turning her attention to her panelist. "Maybe we should just throw softball questions and pretend everything is wonderful. That's not journalism. That's not what we do here." David tried to intervene, his voice diplomatic. "I think what Christine is trying to say is that we have a guest who deserves our respect. Cliff Richard is a legend in the music industry. And..." "A legend," Lorraine interrupted, turning back to Cliff. "You hear that? They think you're a legend. Tell me, Cliff, do legends still need to tour at your age? Do legends still need to beg for attention?" The words hung in the air like poison. Cliff's expression hardened. He had dealt with difficult interviewers before, with critics and skeptics. But this was different. This was personal. This was cruel. "I'm not begging for anything," Cliff replied, his voice firm now. "I'm doing what I love. I'm performing for people who want to hear me. There's no shame in that." "No shame?" Lorraine leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. "So you don't think it's a bit desperate? A bit sad? Clinging to past glory when perhaps it's time to step aside and let the next generation have their moment?" Christine looked horrified. "Lorraine, that's incredibly rude." "It's a fair question," Lorraine shot back. "The public deserves honesty. They deserve to know why someone who should be enjoying retirement is still parading around on stage." Cliff stood up slowly, his movements deliberate. The audience gasped. This wasn't supposed to happen. Guests didn't stand up in the middle of interviews. Guests didn't walk out. "Where do you think you're going?" Lorraine asked, her voice rising. "We're not finished here." "Yes, we are," Cliff said quietly. "I don't have to sit here and listen to this. I've given my life to music, to making people happy, and I won't let you turn that into something ugly." David stood as well, holding out his hand as if to mediate. "Cliff, please, let's just take a breath and—" "No," Cliff said, shaking his head. "I've taken enough breaths. I've shown enough patience. This woman has no interest in having a real conversation. She just wants to tear people down to make herself feel important." Lorraine's face flushed red. She stood up behind her desk, pointing a finger at Cliff. "How dare you? This is my show. You don't get to talk to me like that on my show." "Then maybe you should learn how to treat your guests with basic human decency," Cliff replied. "Maybe you should remember that without people like me, people willing to come on here and share their stories, you wouldn't have a show at all." The studio was completely silent now. The camera operators didn't know where to point their cameras. The producers in the control room were frantically trying to figure out what to do. This had never happened before. Not like this. Christine stood up, her voice shaking slightly. "I think we need to take a break. Everyone just needs to calm down and—" "Don't tell me to calm down, Christine," Lorraine snapped. "I am calm. I'm perfectly calm. What I am is sick of entitled celebrities who think they can just waltz in here and expect to be worshipped." "Entitled?" Cliff's voice rose for the first time. "You're calling me entitled? You, who sits behind that desk day after day, judging people, criticizing people, making them feel small so you can feel big. That's entitlement, Lorraine. That's what real entitlement looks like." David tried again, stepping between them. "Let's all just take a step back. This has gotten out of hand, and I think—" "Move aside, David," Lorraine commanded. "This doesn't concern you." "It concerns all of us," David replied, surprising everyone with the firmness in his voice. "We're supposed to be professionals. We're supposed to create a welcoming environment for our guests. What you're doing right now, Lorraine, it's not right. It's not fair." Lorraine's eyes widened. "Are you seriously taking his side? After everything I've done for you? After I gave you this opportunity?" "This isn't about sides," David said. "This is about basic respect. And right now, you're not showing any—" Cliff began to unclip his microphone. The small gesture seemed to amplify the tension in the room. This was really happening. He was really leaving. "If you walk out that door," Lorraine threatened, her voice low and dangerous, "you'll never be welcome on this show again. Do you understand me? Never." Cliff paused, the microphone now in his hand. He looked at Lorraine with something that might have been pity. "That's a promise I hope you keep," he said softly, "because I would never want to come back to a place where kindness is treated as weakness and cruelty is treated as strength." Christine had tears in her eyes. "Cliff, I'm so sorry. This isn't how we normally—" "I know," Cliff said, his voice gentle now. "I know this isn't you, Christine. Or you, David. You're good people caught in a bad situation." Lorraine slammed her hand on the desk. "Oh, this is rich. This is absolutely rich. You're trying to turn my own panel against me. You're trying to make yourself look like the victim here." "I don't need to try," Cliff said. "The truth speaks for itself." "The truth?" Lorraine's laugh was bitter. "You want to talk about truth? The truth is that you're a relic. The truth is that nobody under the age of 60 cares about your music anymore. The truth is that you're here because you need this show more than this show needs you." The words were designed to wound, to cut deep, but Cliff didn't flinch. He had been in the public eye long enough to know that hurt people hurt people. That insecurity often masked itself as aggression. "You know what I think the real truth is?" Cliff asked, his voice calm and measured. "I think you're angry because you've realized that being mean doesn't make you interesting." It just makes you mean. And deep down, you know that when people remember this show, they won't remember the questions you asked or the points you made. They'll remember how you made people feel. And today, Lorraine, you've made everyone in this room feel terrible. Christine nodded slowly, wiping at her eyes. David looked at Lorraine with something like disappointment. Lorraine seemed to realize she was losing control of the situation. Her voice became shrill. Get out! Just get out. I don't need you. I don't need any of you. There are 100 other guests who would kill to be on this show. Then I suggest you treat them better than you treated me, Cliff said. He turned to the audience, many of whom were watching with their mouths open. Thank you all for your support over the years. It's meant the world to me, and I'm sorry you had to witness this. Several audience members began to applaud. It started small, just a few people, but it grew. More and more people joined in until the entire studio was clapping. They were clapping for Cliff. They were clapping for dignity. They were clapping for someone who refused to be bullied. Lorraine looked around in disbelief. Stop that. Stop clapping right now. This is my show. You don't applaud until I tell you to applaud. But they didn't stop. If anything, the applause grew louder. David stood up straighter, his voice clear and strong. Lorraine, I think you need to take a moment and really think about what just happened here. Really think about whether this is the kind of host you want to be. I don't need a lecture from you, David, Lorraine said, but her voice had lost some of its power. She could see what was happening. She could feel the room turning against her. Christine stood as well, moving to stand beside David. He's right. This has gone too far. Cliff is a guest, a human being who deserves to be treated with kindness. Not whatever this was. Lorraine looked at her two panelists, at the applauding audience, at Cliff standing there with quiet dignity. For just a moment, something flickered across her face. Doubt, perhaps, or maybe the beginning of understanding. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by stubborn pride. Fine, she said coldly. Leave. All of you. I can do this show by myself. Cliff shook his head sadly. No, Lorraine. You can't. Because a show isn't about one person. It's about connection. About bringing people together. About creating something bigger than yourself. And you've forgotten that. He walked toward the exit, his head held high. The audience continued to applaud, some even standing now. As he reached the door, he turned back one last time. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for, he said to Lorraine. I hope you find peace. Because this, he gestured around the studio. This isn't it. And then he was gone. The studio fell into an uncomfortable silence. Lorraine stood behind her desk, her face flushed, her hands trembling slightly. She looked at Christine and David, who were both staring at her with expressions she couldn't quite read. Well, she said, trying to regain control, trying to sound authoritative. That was quite a display of ego, wasn't it? Walking out in the middle of an interview. Very professional. But her voice cracked on the last word, and in that crack, everyone could hear what she was trying so hard to hide. Not anger, not righteousness, but fear. Fear that maybe, just maybe, Cliff Richard had been right. Christine sat back down slowly. I can't believe that just happened, she whispered. David remained standing, looking at the door where Cliff had exited. I can, he said quietly. When you push someone hard enough, when you show them no respect, eventually they're going to push back. Or in this case, walk away. And honestly, I don't blame him. Lorraine whirled on him. You don't blame him. He just embarrassed us on national television. He just made us look like fools. No, David said, meeting her gaze steadily. He didn't make us look like anything. You did that all by yourself. The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Lorraine opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. What could she say? How could she argue with the truth? The audience was beginning to murmur among themselves now. Some were shaking their heads. Others were whispering to their neighbors. The energy in the room had completely shifted. What had started as excitement for a celebrity interview had turned into something else entirely. Something uncomfortable and raw. One of the producers finally spoke through Lorraine's earpiece. "We need to go to commercial. Now." Lorraine nodded numbly, turning to the camera. But before she could speak, before she could try to smooth things over with some practiced line, Christine did something unexpected. She stood up and removed her own microphone. "Christine, what are you doing?" Lorraine asked, her voice tight. "I'm taking a break," Christine said simply. "I need some air. I need to think." "You can't just leave in the middle of a show," Lorraine protested. "Why not?" Christine replied. "Cliff did, and honestly, after what I just witnessed, I understand why." She walked off the set, leaving Lorraine and David alone. The audience watched in stunned silence. This was unprecedented. This was chaos. David looked at Lorraine for a long moment. "You had a chance to make this right," he said quietly. "You could have apologized. You could have shown some humility, but you didn't. And now, look where we are." "Don't you dare abandon me too," Lorraine said, and for the first time, there was genuine panic in her voice. "I'm not abandoning you," David said, "but I'm not going to pretend that what happened here was okay, because it wasn't. It really, really wasn't." The producer's voice came through again, more urgent this time. "Lorraine, we need to cut to commercial. The viewers are seeing all of this." Finally, Lorraine turned to the camera. Her smile was gone. Her confidence was shattered. "We'll be right back," she managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. The lights dimmed slightly as they cut away. Lorraine sank into her chair, her head in her hands. David remained standing, watching her with a mixture of concern and disappointment. In the green room, Cliff Richard was gathering his things. A production assistant approached him hesitantly. "Mr. Richard, I just wanted to say, I'm sorry, that shouldn't have happened to you." Cliff smiled, a genuine smile. "Thank you. That means a lot." "You were right, the assistant continued. "About everything you said. We all see it. We all know how she can be. But nobody ever stands up to her. Nobody ever says anything." "Maybe that's the problem," Cliff said gently. "Maybe if more people spoke up, she would understand that there's a better way. That kindness isn't weakness. That respect isn't optional." Back on set, the commercial break was ending. Lorraine had composed herself somewhat, fixing her hair and reapplying her lipstick. But her hands were still shaking. David sat back down, but his body language was different now. Closed off. Protective. The cameras came back on. Lorraine looked directly into the lens, her smile forced and brittle. "Welcome back. As you just saw, we had a bit of a disagreement with our guest. But that's television, isn't it? Not everything goes according to plan." She was trying to laugh it off, trying to minimize what had happened, but even she could hear how hollow it sounded. David said nothing. He just looked at his notes, his jaw tight. "So," Lorraine continued, struggling now, "let's move on to our next segment, shall we? David, you had something you wanted to discuss about." "No," David said quietly. Lorraine blinked. "I'm sorry?" "I said no," David repeated, looking up at her. "I don't want to move on. I don't want to pretend that what just happened was normal or acceptable. Because it wasn't." The audience leaned forward, captivated despite themselves. This was real. This was raw. This was unlike anything they had ever seen on daytime television. "David, we're live," Lorraine hissed. "I know we're live," David said. "Maybe that's exactly why this needs to be said. Cliff Richard is one of the most respected artists in the world. He's brought joy to millions of people. He's conducted himself with grace and professionalism for over 6 decades. And you treated him like he was nothing, like he was beneath you. And that's not okay. Lorraine's face went pale, then red. I was asking tough questions. That's my job. There's a difference between tough questions and cruelty, David said. And what you did crossed that line. Way over that line. The silence that followed was deafening. Lorraine looked at David, then at the camera, then back at David. She seemed lost, unable to find her footing, unable to regain control. I think, she said slowly, her voice wavering, I think we need to end the show early today. I think we all need some time to reflect on what happened. It was the closest thing to an admission of wrongdoing she could manage, and even that seemed to cost her everything. David nodded slowly. I think that's probably for the best. Lorraine turned to the camera one last time. Her eyes were glassy, her composure crumbling. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. But everyone watching knew that tomorrow would be different, that something fundamental had shifted, that you couldn't unring this bell. As the cameras cut and the lights dimmed, Lorraine remained in her chair, staring at nothing. The audience filed out quietly, their excited chatter from earlier replaced by somber murmurs. David stood up and walked over to her. For a moment, he just looked at her. Then, surprisingly, he placed a hand on her shoulder. You can fix this, he said quietly, but you have to actually want to. You have to actually care. Lorraine didn't respond. She couldn't, because deep down, she knew that he was right. She knew that Cliff was right. She knew that everyone was right except her, and that was the hardest truth of all to face. Somewhere across town, Cliff Richard was in a car heading home. His phone was already buzzing with messages from friends, colleagues, and fans who had seen what happened. Messages of support, messages of solidarity, messages saying that they were proud of him for standing up for himself. He looked out the window at the passing streets, at the ordinary people going about their ordinary lives, and he smiled, because he had done the right thing. He had stayed true to himself. He had refused to be diminished. And in the end, that was all that really mattered. The makeup artist who had worked on Cliff before the show approached one of the cameramen, her voice hushed. I've been working on this show for 3 years, and I've never seen anything like that. Never. She's gone after people before, sure, but this was different. This was personal. The cameraman nodded grimly. I got it all on tape. Every word, every expression. The network is going to have a field day with this. Good, the makeup artist said firmly. Maybe they'll finally see what we all see. Maybe they'll finally do something about how she treats people. Back at the studio, the crew was packing up equipment in silence. Christine had returned, her eyes still red from crying. She found David in the hallway, where he was leaning against the wall, looking exhausted. Is she okay? Christine asked. David shrugged. I don't know. I think she's in shock. I don't think she expected anyone to actually call her out. Not like that. Not in front of everyone. She should have expected it, Christine said, her voice harder than usual. You can only push people so far before they push back. I've watched her do this for months now, David. Months. And every time I thought about saying something, I talked myself out of it. I told myself it wasn't my place. That she knew what she was doing. That it was all part of the show. But it's not, David said quietly. It's not part of the show. It's just who she is. Or who she's become. I'm not even sure she knows the difference anymore. Christine wiped at her eyes again. I keep thinking about his face. Cliff's face. When she said that thing about him being desperate. He looked so hurt. And then he looked resigned. Like he'd seen this before. Like he knew there was no point in trying to reason with her. Because there wasn't, David agreed. Once she decides to go after someone, she doesn't stop. She just keeps pushing and pushing until something breaks. Usually, people just sit there and take it because they don't want to cause a scene. But Cliff isn't just anyone. He's been in this industry longer than most of us have been alive. He's dealt with real critics, real challenges. He wasn't going to sit there and be disrespected by someone who was just trying to score points. "Do you think she'll change?" Christine wondered, her voice small. "I hope so," David said. "But change has to come from within. It has to come from a genuine desire to be better. And I'm not sure she's there yet. I'm not sure she even understands what she did wrong." Did you see her face when the audience started clapping for him? She looked genuinely confused, like she couldn't understand why they weren't on her side. Christine shook her head slowly. Because she lives in a bubble. She surrounds herself with people who tell her what she wants to hear, and anyone who dares to disagree gets pushed out. Remember Sarah? Remember how she tried to tell Lorraine that she was being too harsh with that author last month? And she was gone by the end of the week, David finished. "Yeah, I remember." They stood together in the quiet hallway, two people trying to make sense of what had just happened, trying to understand how a simple interview had turned into something so explosive, so revealing, so painful. "I'm glad Cliff walked out," Christine said finally. "I'm glad he didn't just sit there and take it. Someone needed to draw a line. Someone needed to say, enough is enough. And maybe now, maybe after seeing what happened, the producers will finally step in. Maybe they'll finally realize that ratings aren't worth destroying people's dignity." David nodded. "Me too. And maybe, just maybe, this will be a wake-up call. Not just for Lorraine, but for everyone who thinks that being harsh is the same as being honest. That being cruel is the same as being strong. Because what Cliff showed us today is that real strength is knowing when to walk away. Real strength is refusing to participate in something that demeans you." He could have yelled back, Christine observed. He could have said terrible things to her. He had every right to, after what she said to him. But he didn't. He just stated the facts and left. That's class. That's dignity. "That's why people love him," David said. "That's why he's lasted this long. It's not just about the music. It's about the person. And Lorraine can't stand that. She can't stand when someone is genuinely good, genuinely kind, because it highlights everything she's not." A production assistant walked by, stopping when she saw them. "Have either of you seen Lorraine? The producers need to speak with her." "She's in her dressing room," Christine said. "But I'd give her a few minutes if I were you. She's not in a good place right now." The assistant nodded and hurried off. Christine and David exchanged glances. "Do you think they'll fire her?" Christine asked. "I don't know," David admitted. "Part of me hopes they do. Part of me hopes they give her a chance to make this right. But either way, things are going to change. They have to. After what happened today, after what the whole country saw, there's no going back to business as usual." In her dressing room, Lorraine sat alone in the dark. The makeup was smudged under her eyes. Her hands were still trembling. And for the first time in a very long time, she allowed herself to really think about the person she had become. The person who valued ratings over relationships. The person who confused confrontation with conversation. The person who had just driven away a legend because she couldn't control her own need to feel superior. She replayed the moment in her mind, over and over. The look on Cliff's face when she called him desperate. The way Christine had cried. The way David had stood up to her. Something he'd never done before. The way the audience had applauded when Cliff walked out. Not for her. Never for her. For him. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. It was her producer, looking grim. "We need to talk," he said simply. Lorraine nodded slowly, knowing what was coming. knowing that her world was about to change in ways she couldn't control or manipulate. And Lorraine knew that her day was far from over, that the consequences of her actions were just beginning, that the world had seen who she really was, and there was no taking that back. But all of that would come later. Right now, in this moment, all she could think about were Cliff's words. His calm, devastating words that had cut through all her defenses and exposed the truth she had been running from. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for. She closed her eyes, and for the first time, she wondered if she ever would.